The cold was the first thing I noticed. It was a deep, biting cold. The kind that settled into your bones and refused to leave. I was huddled in a shallow crevice. It was just a crack in the immense red wall of the Grand Canyon. The sandstone was rough against my back. It scraped me even through my expensive, sponsored jacket. It was long past midnight. The vast, starry sky above the canyon rim offered no warmth. There was only the sound of the wind. It was a low, constant whistle. It sounded like a mournful cry. This was not how I had imagined it. I checked the luminous dial of my watch again. It felt like the 100th time. 2:00 in the morning. He was 2 hours late. Ben was never late. He was not late for our first date. He was not late for our wedding. He was not late for a single brand meeting in 7 years. His punctuality was a running joke between us. It was a joke that felt bitter and wrong now. The plan was supposed to be simple. Ben had called it our masterpiece. He called it our social experiment. We would drive to the South Rim. We would film our hike to the Bright Angel Trail. I would pretend to get lost. He would frantically search for an hour. Then he would report me missing. I would hide for 24 hours. Right here. In this exact spot. We had scouted it weeks before. We had stocked it with water and protein bars. Then, I would miraculously find my way back to the trail. I would be dehydrated and emotional. I would stumble out just as Ben was organizing a private search. The media would love it. Our engagement numbers would skyrocket. Our flagging careers as the Chloe and Ben adventure couple would be saved. It was just one day. It was just 24 hours of discomfort. All for a lifetime of security. That was the plan. A sudden, rhythmic chopping sound shattered the silence. My heart jumped into my throat. A searchlight, blindingly white, sliced through the darkness. It swept across the cliff, face far above me. It illuminated the jagged rock in stark, terrifying detail. A search and rescue helicopter. I pressed myself deeper into the crevice. I made myself small, invisible. This was wrong. This was all wrong. The plan was that Ben would call off any official search. He was supposed to stop it before it got this serious. He was supposed to tell them I was an expert survivalist. He was supposed to insist on coordinating a private team. This helicopter was not part of the plan. My fingers fumbled for the small, battery-powered radio in my pack. I needed to hear the news. I needed to know what narrative Ben was spinning. I turned the dial. The static hissed and popped in the confined space. It felt impossibly loud in the silence. Finally, a voice cut through. It was a late-night news report from a Flagstaff station. The reporter's voice was grave. He said the search for missing influencer Chloe Martin was now entering its 3rd day. My breath caught in my chest. I could not breathe. 3rd day. Not 1 day. 3rd day. The reporter continued. He said the local sheriff was scaling back the official search. He cited the harsh conditions. He cited the lack of any leads. Then, the broadcast played a clip. I heard Ben's voice. It was thick. It was choked with sobs. It was the voice he used when he watched sad movies. It was a performance he could turn on and off like a faucet. I recognized it instantly. He was telling a journalist that he refused to give up hope. He told the nation that Chloe was his entire life. He made a tearful plea for any volunteers to come and help him find his wife. He said he could not live without her. The helicopter's spotlight washed over the canyon wall again. It felt closer this time. I clicked the radio off. The silence that rushed back in was deafening. I stared into the darkness. The rock was digging into my spine. The protein bars and water bottles at my feet suddenly seemed pathetic. They were supplies for 1 day. He had left me here for 3 days. He was not 2 hours late for the pickup. He was 2 days late. He was not managing a crisis. He was performing at a press conference. He was the devastated husband. He was the star of the show. A cold, sharp realization cut through my panic. It was colder than the desert night. This was not our plan. This was his plan. And I, shivering alone in a crack in the rock. I was not the co-star. I was the plot device. He was not coming. Ben was not coming. It had not always been this cold. 3 months ago. We were in Los Angeles. The only thing we worried about was the oppressive August heat of our west-facing apartment in Santa Monica. Our apartment was not really a home. It was a content studio. It was a storage unit for our brand. 2 brand new, bright yellow kayaks leaned against the living room wall. Their paddles were still wrapped in plastic. They were sent by a sponsor we had yet to promote. Boxes of high-end, dehydrated meals were stacked neatly by the kitchen counter. Hiking boots we had never worn lined the hallway. Everything was clean. Everything was minimalist. Everything was perfectly arranged for a background shot. Everything was a prop for the life of Chloe and Ben. But the brand was dying. I knew it. He knew it. I sat on our beige sofa, scrolling endlessly through our main social media feed. The engagement numbers were falling. They were falling faster every week. Our last video was a complicated drone shot over Malibu. It took 6 hours to film. It had barely cracked 50,000 views. A year ago, it would have hit 1 million by morning. The comments section was even worse. I read the words silently. Another sponsored post. This feels so stale. Are they even a real couple anymore? They used to be about adventure. Now they are just about selling stuff. The comments were brutal. They were also true. Ben was not sitting. Ben was pacing. He moved from the window to the kitchen. He picked up a sponsored energy bar, read the label, and threw it back down. He was a tightly coiled spring of anxiety and restless energy. He was the visionary. He was the one who had built Chloe and Ben from nothing. He built it from a simple travel blog into a limited liability corporation. We had a talent agent and a 6-figure income. He had built it, and now he was watching it crumble. He checked his own phone. He winced at the same numbers I was seeing. He turned to me. His voice was sharp. He said we were drowning. He said our agent had called that morning. Our biggest contract, the one with Summit Outdoors gear, was up for renewal. The company was hesitating. They wanted something new. They wanted something authentic that would break through the noise. Ben repeated that phrase. Break through the noise. With a bitter, sarcastic edge. I suggested we go back to basics. Maybe a long backpacking trip. No sponsors. Just us and a camera. Like the old days. I remembered our first trip to the Oregon coast. We had no money. We slept in the back of our rusty car. We ate cold beans from a can. It was the happiest I had ever been. Ben scoffed at the idea. He said the old days were gone. He said authentic did not sell anymore. Not unless it was authentic tragedy or authentic triumph. He stopped pacing. He stood very still in the middle of the room. He was staring at a framed poster on the wall. It was one of our first viral photos. It was a shot of us kissing on the edge of a canyon at sunrise. He turned to me slowly. A new light was in his eyes. It was the look he got right before he did something brilliant. Or something reckless. He said he had it. He said he had the idea. He called it epic. He called it the ultimate story. He laid it all out. The Grand Canyon. The Bright Angel Trail. A staged disappearance. He spoke quickly. His energy was infectious. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. He said it was not a lie. He called it a social experiment. He said it was a commentary on modern media. A commentary on how quickly the world jumps to conclusions. He planned every single beat. The last happy video. The frantic 911 call. The desperate search. He would be the devoted husband. Terrified but strong. I would be the experienced hiker. Lost but resourceful. I was horrified. I stood up from the sofa. My phone clattered to the floor. I told him he was insane. I used words like deceptive. I used words like fraudulent and illegal. I asked what would happen when the National Park Service scrambled a helicopter for a fake emergency. I asked what we would tell our followers. The people who genuinely trusted us. I told him it was a monstrous betrayal of that trust. Ben did not get angry. He did not raise his voice. He did something far more effective. He looked wounded. He sat down on the sofa and put his head in his hands. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. He asked me if I remembered our first tiny apartment in Echo Park. He asked if I remembered eating instant noodles and dreaming of this life. He told me this life, our life, was about to end. He said the Summit Outdoors contract was worth over $200,000. He said it was our mortgage. He said it was our future. He painted a picture of our failure. He described us having to sell our gear. He described us having to get real jobs. He described us giving up the dream we had built together. He insisted it was just one day, just 24 hours of hiding. He said he would coordinate everything. He promised he would make a private search his main priority. He would keep the official rangers at bay. He said the reunion would be so emotional. It would be so powerful. He said everyone would forget the details. They would just see the love. They would just see the triumph. I stared at him. I saw the desperation in his eyes. I mistook it for passion. I saw the flaws in the plan. I was blinded by the fear of losing everything. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that this one terrible compromise would save us. I looked around the perfect, sterile apartment. I looked at the kayaks. I looked at the boots. I looked at the life we had curated. It was all fake. What was one more fake thing? I took a deep breath. I nodded slowly. I said okay. Just one day. I told him I would do it. Ben's face lit up. He jumped up and hugged me. He lifted me off the ground. He called me his savior. He called me his partner. He kissed me. His lips felt cold. As he held me, I felt a sickening knot form in my stomach. It was a feeling of dread so profound. It was so icy. For just a moment. It felt exactly like the desert night. 3 months in the future. The execution was cold. It was precise. It was a performance. We drove to the South Rim in our heavily sponsored Jeep. The logo for Summit Outdoors gear was emblazoned on the side. The cameras were already rolling. We filmed our last hike video. It was a carefully curated montage of forced smiles and staged affection. We held hands. Looking out over the vast expanse, my smile felt brittle. It felt like glass. Ben's smile felt rehearsed. We reached the designated spot. It was a popular overlook on the Bright Angel Trail. It was teeming with tourists. This was the chaos Ben wanted. This was the cover. He squeezed my hand. It was a quick, businesslike gesture. While he pretended to film a time-lapse of the sunset, I simply slipped away from the crowd. It was easier than I thought. No one noticed. I moved off the marked trail. My heart was pounding. I followed the dry creek bed they had scouted. It was a route hidden from the main path. I did not look back. I heard him, exactly 1 hour later. Just as we had planned, his voice echoed faintly off the canyon walls. He was shouting my name. His voice was a perfect symphony of rising panic. Chloe. Oh my God. Chloe, where are you? He was filming. I knew he was filming his own face. He was capturing the moment he realized I was gone. Then, he made the 911 call. I pictured him. Phone to his ear. His face a mask of terror. He was reporting his wife missing to a dispatcher. The response was not just immediate. It was nuclear. Ben's frantic cell phone footage was the first piece of media. He uploaded it within the hour. It went viral before the National Park Service had even launched their first search helicopter. Where is Chloe? Martin was trending on every platform before nightfall. The story was irresistible. A beautiful couple. A tragic disappearance. All set against the dangerous beauty of the Grand Canyon. Every major network sent a satellite truck. I watched it all from the crevice. My small, dark hiding spot was illuminated by the glow of my burner phone. I felt a deep, sickening wave of guilt. I watched footage of real, dedicated Park Service rangers. They were organizing search grids in the twilight. I saw helmeted men and women rappelling down cliffs. I saw dogs. They were risking their lives for a lie. I sent a text to Ben's burner phone. I wrote that this was too much. I wrote that the search was too real. We had to stop. His reply was reassuring. He told me it was working perfectly. He said the media was eating it up. He told me to just hold tight. He promised it was just 24 hours. Just like we planned. But the 24 hours came and went. The sun rose on the second day. I was sore. I was cold. I was terrified. I texted him again. I demanded to know when it was over. Ben's reply came an hour later. He said he needed to extend it. He said the momentum was too big to stop now. He said 48 hours. Just one more day. I protested. I said that was not the deal. I said I was running out of water. His next text was manipulative. And it worked. He told me that Summit Outdoors Gear had just called. They were praying for us. They had offered to bankroll a private search. He told me this was it. This was the contract. He told me not to back out now. Before I could argue, a new alert popped up on my phone. It was a live feed. Ben was on Good Morning America. He was sitting in a hotel room near the canyon. His eyes were red and puffy. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. He was a masterpiece of grief. He spoke about my survival skills. How strong I was. He spoke about our love. He was brilliant. And then, he announced the GoFundMe. He told the anchor that the official search was being scaled back. He said he would not give up. He was launching a private, elite search and rescue team, but he needed help to fund it. The Find Chloe Fund went live as he was speaking. I found the page on my phone. My hands were shaking. I watched the numbers. $10,000. $50,000. It blasted past $100,000 in the first hour. People were emptying their pockets for a lie. They were donating their grocery money to a man who was lying to their faces. By the end of the second day, the new 48-hour deadline, the fund was sitting at just over $300,000. He texted Ben. My fingers were fumbling with cold. I told him this was not a stunt anymore. This was a federal crime. They had $300,000. I told him to stop it. I told him I was coming out. I waited. The sun was setting again. The desert air was turning frigid. The silence from his phone was absolute. I waited for 1 minute, then 5 minutes, then 10. Finally, my phone vibrated. A new message from Ben. It was just 4 words. Stay put. Trust me. I read the message again. I looked at the dwindling battery bar on my phone. I looked at my last half-full bottle of water. I felt the gnawing guilt, but it was now being choked by a new, sharp, and primal spike of fear. The rendezvous was tonight. He had to be there. I was still trusting him. I had to. The rendezvous time was midnight. The clock on my phone ticked past 1 o'clock. Then, 2 o'clock. It was now almost sunrise on the third day. The silence in the canyon was absolute. He was not late. He was gone. The final text message. Stay put. Trust me. Echoed in my mind. It was a cruel, mocking joke. The trust was gone. The hope was gone. Only the cold remained. My hands were shaking. They were shaking not just from the cold, but from a new, sickening dread. The burner phone's battery icon was a tiny sliver of red. It showed maybe 15% remaining. I had been saving it. I was hoarding the power. I was waiting for the all-clear signal that would never come. I had to know why. I could not die in this crevice without knowing why. I closed the messaging app. I opened the phone slow. Agonizingly slow. Prepaid web browser. My fingers were stiff as I typed my own name into the search bar. Chloe Martin. The results hit me like a physical blow. The headlines were no longer about a missing hiker. They were not about a desperate search. The narrative had changed. The tone was somber. It was final. I read the words. Search for influencer Chloe Martin, officially suspended. Tragic new evidence discovered in Grand Canyon disappearance. Sheriff rules out foul play. Investigation closed. Suspended. Closed. What evidence? My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked the top link. It was a video from a major news network. It was timestamped from the previous afternoon. It was a press conference. The video buffered for a long, painful minute. Then it played. I saw the familiar face of the Coconino County Sheriff. His hat was in his hands. It looked grim, and standing next to him, bathed in the flashing blue and red lights of police cars, was Ben. Ben was a wreck. He was weeping, openly and hysterically. He was not just sad. He was shattered. He clung to the podium for support. His entire body was shaking with what looked like unbearable grief. The sheriff cleared his throat. He looked into the cameras. He announced that, based on heartbreaking new evidence, the active search and rescue operation for Chloe Martin was officially over. I stopped breathing. The sheriff continued. He said that hotel staff, cleaning the couple's room, had discovered a letter. He held up a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside, I could see my own familiar, cream-colored stationery. It was the stationery I used for writing thank you notes to sponsors. The sheriff began to read from the letter. He said it was a suicide note. The audio was perfectly clear. I listened, frozen in disbelief. I heard the sheriff read words I had never written. He read them in a voice that was not mine. The note spoke of my crushing depression. It spoke of my overwhelming guilt over our fake, curated online life. It said I could not live with the lie anymore. The note ended with a final, devastating line. It said, "I am going to the canyon to find peace. Please do not look for me." I dropped the phone. It clattered against the rock. It was not a plan. It was an assassination. He had framed me. I snatched the phone back up. My mind was racing faster than it ever had before. The money, the GoFundMe. I frantically typed in the address for their shared checking account. I logged in. The balance was $0. $0.00. He had cleaned it out. My fingers flew to the GoFundMe page. The page was still active, but a new banner was displayed across the top. It read, "In light of the tragic news, this fund is now closed to donations. All proceeds will be transferred to Mr. Perrine Martin to cover funeral expenses and to support mental health awareness charities in Chloe's name." The total amount raised was listed just below, $412,000. He had taken it all. I stared at the screen. I looked at the video of my husband, the grieving widower. He was being gently led away from the cameras by a sympathetic police officer. He had not just abandoned me. He had erased me. He had stolen my money. He had stolen my name. He had stolen my death. He had given the world a perfect, tragic story. He had given them a closed case. He was rich. He was free. And I was a dead woman walking. The phone's battery icon flashed a final disparate red. It was 10%. The screen dimmed. It was trying to preserve its last few minutes of life. I stared at it. That phone was my only connection to the world. It was also my cage. I could not call 911. I could not call for help. A new thought, cold and sharp and pragmatic, cut through my terror. If I did call the sheriff, what would I say? Would I tell them that Ben Martin, the nation's grieving widower, they was a liar and a thief? They would ask me where I had been for 3 days. They would ask me to explain the suicide note, my suicide note, and then they would look at me. They would recognize me. I was Chloe Martin, the woman who had faked her own disappearance. The line between fraud and victim was now hopelessly blurred. I was a criminal. Ben had not just trapped me in the canyon. He had trapped me in my own lie. If I went to the authorities, I would be the one arrested. Ben had checkmated me. No, not quite. I looked down at my hands. The knuckles were raw and bleeding from clutching the sandstone. I looked at my hiking boots, the ones from Summit Outdoors Gear. They were top of the line. They were real. I looked up at the towering canyon walls. Before the brand, before Ben, I was a climber. I had been a wilderness survival guide in Wyoming for 3 years. Ben had always called it my boring backstory. He said it was something to downplay for their luxury adventure brand. Now, it was the only thing that could save me. My brain switched modes. It shut down the panic. It opened the survival checklist. The helicopter was gone. The search was over. No one was looking for me. That was a good thing. It meant I could move without hiding. I killed the web browser on my phone. I had one last thing to do. I opened my text messages. I scrolled up. Past Ben's final. Chilling command. Stay put. Trust me. I scrolled past the GoFundMe links. I scrolled all the way up. I scrolled past 3 months of our life. To the very beginning. And there they were. The original messages. Ben's excited texts. I have the epic idea. 24 hours. Max. We will call it a social experiment. Meet me at Crevice Point at midnight on day 2. And my replies. My hesitation. My worries about the park service. And Ben's reassurance. I will handle the 911 call. It will be a performance. It was all there. It was a complete, time-stamped digital record of the original fraud. It was not proof of his murder plot, but it was proof that the suicide note was a lie. It was proof that the grieving husband was a co-conspirator. The battery was at 5%. I knew every major reporter had covered this story. They all loved Ben. All except one. There was one journalist. A woman from a small, independent online magazine in Arizona. It was called The Desert Scrutiny. Her name was Alicia Reyes. Alicia's articles had been different. They were skeptical. She had questioned the timeline. She had questioned how Ben managed to upload a frantic video with such high-quality edits so quickly. The media machine had called her a cynic. I now knew she was a genius. Chloe's frozen thumbs were clumsy. I found Alicia's contact email. I had memorized it from the articles. I opened a new message. I attached the screenshots of the entire text conversation. I confessed to everything. I wrote that I was Chloe Martin. I wrote that I was alive. I wrote that the disappearance was a hoax. I called it a stupid, desperate plan that I had agreed to. I owned my original sin. Then, I told Alicia about the 48-hour extension. I told her about the suicide note. I told her about the empty bank account. I told her about the $400,000. I wrote that Ben had left me to die. I wrote that he was turning our fraud into his perfect murder. I hit send. The screen froze. A tiny, spinning icon appeared. The battery was at 1%. The screen went black. I did not know if the message had gone through. It did not matter. I had fired my only bullet. I put the dead, useless phone back in my pocket. I picked up my empty water bottle. I stood up. My joints screamed in protest against the cold. I looked out of the crevice and into the pale, gray light of dawn. I was no longer an influencer. I was no longer a wife. I was, once again, just a survivor. And I had to hike 8 miles. With no water. Through hostile terrain. I had to do it all while avoiding the ghost of the woman I was supposed to be. I put one foot in front of the other. I began to climb. The email went through. Alicia Reyes received the screenshots and the confession at 3 o'clock in the morning. She was the journalist who had doubted the official story from the beginning. She did not sleep for the next 48 hours. She verified every timestamp. She cross-referenced the text messages with the public 911 logs. She hired a digital forensics expert to confirm the screenshots were not fabricated. She found an anonymous source inside the bank who confirmed the massive wire transfers. She found the offshore account Ben had opened in the Cayman Islands, just 1 day before the disappearance. While I was still dragging myself over the canyon rim, Alicia's article detonated online. The Desert Scrutiny published the story under a devastating headline: "The Canyon Echo influencer's tragic suicide was an elaborate hoax and a failed murder." The fallout was not just immediate. It was absolute. The same media outlets that had broadcast Ben's grief now had to broadcast his sociopathic text messages. The public narrative did not just flip, it inverted. The sympathy turned into a white-hot, collective rage. The entire, horrifying story was laid bare. The staged hike, the fake 911 call, the GoFundMe, the suicide note, the empty bank account. The man who had performed his grief for Good Morning America was now the most hated man in the country. The FBI immediately issued a federal warrant for his arrest. He was charged with multiple counts of wire fraud and conspiracy. But Ben was gone. By the time Alicia's article went live, he was on a chartered flight over the Atlantic. He landed in a small country that had no extradition treaty with the United States. He was a fugitive. He was a monster. And he was a millionaire. He was protected by the $412,000 he had stolen from a sympathetic public. 2 days later, I walked into the Coconino County Sheriff's office. I was dehydrated. I was emaciated. My lips were cracked and bleeding. My feet were a raw mess of blisters. But I was alive. I did not wait for them to accuse me. I sat down, put my hands on the table, and turned myself in. I faced the consequences. My initial lie was still a crime. I pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit fraud. I pleaded guilty to 1 count of making a false report to law enforcement. I cooperated fully. I provided a 4-hour deposition against Ben. I detailed every message, every plan, every manipulation. The judge acknowledged my ordeal. He acknowledged that I was a victim of a horrific betrayal. But he also condemned my initial deception, the one that had wasted valuable state resources. The story ends 6 months later. I am not on Instagram. I am not in a sponsored Jeep. I am standing on the side of an Arizona highway. I am wearing a bright orange vest over my simple clothes. I am picking up trash. It is part of my 200 hours of court-mandated community service. My hair is pulled back. My face is bare. The perfect, curated mask of Chloe Martin. Influencer is gone forever. A car speeds past. Kicking up dust and exhaust. I do not flinch. I simply move to the next piece of litter. My movements are steady and deliberate. I had lost everything. I lost my husband. I lost my career. I lost my reputation. I lost my home. But as I stood under the vast, honest, and unforgiving desert sky, I realized a profound truth. Ben had not erased me. He had liberated me. He had destroyed the fake person I had spent 10 years building. He had forced me to find the real one. The one who knew how to survive. The one who knew how to climb. The one who, finally, knew how to tell the truth. Even when it cost her everything. I finished my work for the day. I got into an old, unremarkable car, and I drove home. Finally, completely free.